yeah.
I think I'd like to finish with this piece
Yeah.
and then have a few questions. Now, I know you were very keen indeed, as I was, to include this work.
Yes. What I love about this is a question that fascinates me about objects, about the kind of order in which you see objects. Do you see the pattern first, or do you see the figures first, or do you see both together? I mean, for me, I think I see the pattern first, and then the figures very quickly come into play, and that near obliteration for me of the actual object by the pattern I find completely stunning and compelling. And I think the actual object itself, they look like kind of European folk dancers. It's almost like a fancy dress party rather than something that is authentically Chinese. And I quite like that aspect of it as well.
So again, that sort of element of pretense that's coming in. Just to give a couple of facts, this was made actually not by Joseph Williams, but by Joseph Willems, who was a Flemish sculptor, came to London in the 1740s to work for the Chelsea manufactory, making models which would be translated into porcelain. So that's what we're looking at here is porcelain. Been fired several times in order to get the colour, and it probably would have been at the base of some kind of lamp. There might have been something coming out of it. This is where that division between what's sculpture and what's classified as decorative art starts rearing its ugly head. Where I'm particularly gripped by this object at the moment because it will be one of the centerpieces of some new British galleries that we're hoping to refurbish over the next few years, and yet it should feel as if it's very accessible, and somehow it's not. People resist this object in a very remarkable degree.
Really?
Yeah, when we've shown it to design historians, for example, one of them memorably called it a piece of racist kitsch. And the reason for that was because precisely the sorts of reasons that you've just given, which is that, there's a pretense to this. This is a voyage of the imagination. This is not a documentary piece about what it would be like to be Asian in the 18th century or anything close. And I think that element of fantasy has disturbed people. And I think the element of fantasy associated with, again, that idea of a luxury object and a luxury material. And then, of course, the whole overlay of years and years of rather awful porcelain figures, and then perhaps even worse, Jeff Koons's appropriation of them to re-emphasize the kitsch still further, has meant that this object has seemingly become incredibly distant for people, and yet you responded to it absolutely straight away.
I think also that it isn't obsessed by things like good modelling, and yet the modelling on this is absolutely wonderful. It's really subtle, but there's a kind of, for me, a sort of feeling that the modelling was sort of innate rather than learnt and educated. And I think that quality it's not just that it's outsider art or can be categorised in that slightly tedious way. There's something about that it's serving a purpose. It's expedient. And I think there are, Picasso sculptures have that quality as well.
It's very oddly relaxed.
And Louise Bourgeois, and to some extent Giacometti, where the material does as much as it need to do, and then this glorious kind of subversion of that with the decoration, as though there was a waiting to do the decoration. This was the thing that was going to be the really fun part, in a way.
I mean, it's
and the colour, I think, is astonishing.
Yeah. No, I mean, in fact, one of the funny things about it is, you're right, it's an oddly relaxed piece in a way, and as a result, it's perhaps the most fluidly three-dimensional work of all the ones that we've looked at. It really moves you around without any kind of sense of disjuncture. I think we should, if we're going to get any questions, maybe seek them now. There's a question right in the front row.
I I can't see a thing.
Just there, I can just. There we go.
Phyllida, hello. Your work is so much about colour. I find it painterly. It's very interesting, your choice that you made mutually, I imagine, to deal with mostly white, purist, and did you not consider, or was there not any wooden painted sculpture to look at, even from the 17th, 18th century, like Spanish sculpture?
Well, we went for these because of the colour, But I was trying to, in a way, I mean, when I first, as I said, when I first went online to choose the 10 objects, I slightly misunderstood what my role was to be, and I went online and there were something like 485,000 sculptural objects of them there. And I got to 40,000 years BC and I'd already chosen 40 things. So I was very apprehensive.
Luckily I turned up.
Yes. So in a way it was a great relief to be taken to work that, quite honestly, I would probably not usually consider. So for me this was a real experience to be led to things that don't have that kind of sculptural value that's inherent to what I do, and which is usually Paleolithic and then a huge long gap, I'm embarrassed to say, and then the 20th century. So it was wonderful to actually look at work that, even though I admire it in some ways, I'm not quite so interested in it. But now I am, because I was able to study it through Luke's guidance in a way that was compatible with some of the issues of sculpture that do weight, posture, location, its physical presence in a space. Those things are, to me, as important as colour. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much for your presentation and showing us different mediums of sculptures like porcelain, ivory and marble. And the wonderful bust of child you showed us by Hodon. And you mentioned the terracotta model would be made before this actual sculpture. Would you agree with me that terracotta model would be much more sensible and much more precise compared to the actual final piece? And actually, it's also according to the idea of a child, it would be much more valuable from the sensibility and of psychology point of view as a marble. What do you think about it?
Well, I'd much rather hear from Phyllida than... There we go, let's look at the back of her again.
Did I understand your question that the terracotta, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, that would have sat behind the clay model, that would have sat behind the... Whether this would have had a sort of different value, a quickness, a life that that maybe the marble doesn't have. Is that and associated also with modelling as opposed to carving as a kind of sense of having its own meaning in relation to the portrait of a child? Is that sort of more or less?
Yes, and also exactly this time, Rousseau already wrote. So Rousseau works about childhood, to give childhood a natural education, childhood for children and kids. So this relation to the medium, terracotta medium, would make the sculpture much more sensible. Like a child looked like a child, and the marble would feel more conventional. Would you agree with me?
I think there is a sort of monumentality about the child in this, except for this back view, which I think may be released from having to convey the portrait. That there's something more childlike has emerged. But I didn't see the terracotta of this.
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it exists.
Yeah, but I know exactly what you're saying. I wonder whether it's also something about the closeness of the hand to the material, and the minute you're using these tools, a whole other approach starts to happen. I think it's a great question. Yeah.
going to call an end to proceedings for today. I must thank you both so much. This talk is exactly what we have in mind when we conceive of these types of conversations. It was everything I would have wanted, and I would say on behalf of the audience that I hope you two carry on talking, because you make very good conversation partners. So please do.
Thank you.